For years, both staff and visitors at Westminster Abbey have shared some pretty creepy stories from within its sacred walls. Tales of those weird cold spots that hit even in the summer, the soft sounds of chanting long after the choir has packed up and left, and those quick flashes of shadows that you catch just out of the corner of your eye. But there's one legend that really stands out, the creepy tale of the Midnight Specter. It's a chilling story about a figure that roams the Abbey only when everything is dark and quiet. So, who exactly is this ghostly figure? Some think it's a monk, others believe it could be a judge, and some say it's a soldier. But our research for this video shows that the truth is way more complicated and scarier than anyone thinks. Because the Midnight Specter isn't just one ghost, it's actually three, and we're going to meet all of them. To really get a grip on the ghosts of Westminster Abbey, you've first got to know a bit about the Abbey itself. Its story starts off over 1,000 years ago on a soggy patch of land along the Thames known as Thorney Island. Legend has it that there's been a church here since the 7th century, but the strongest evidence points to a Benedictine monastery popping up around 960 AD, thanks to King Edgar and St. Dunstan. Now, the Abbey we recognise today started taking shape with one of England's last Anglo-Saxon kings, Edward the Confessor. In the 1040s, he didn't just fix up the existing church, he completely reimagined it. Originally set up as a Benedictine monastic church, it quickly turned into an impressive backdrop for royal events and became super important for royal burials too. Edward was laid to rest in his new church in 1066, setting off a tradition that would stick around for centuries. His shrine became the spiritual centre of the Abbey, and for the next 700 years, England's kings and queens chose to be buried nearby, hoping for his heavenly protection in their afterlife. Think about that for a moment. This glorious, soaring Gothic masterpiece, a symbol of faith and power, was also designed as a city for the dead. Its very architecture is a testament to this dual purpose. Walk through the nave, and you might be walking over the graves of prime ministers like Clement Attlee and Neville Chamberlain. Wander into the north transept, and you stand among statesmen. Enter the south transept, and you find yourself in the famed Poets' Corner, where the memorials of Chaucer, Dickens, and Kipling line the walls. The Abbey is the site of burials or memorials for more than 3,300 people, a staggering concentration of history and mortality. Every quiet corner is saturated with the memory of death. Our first ghost is perhaps the most famous, and initially the most benign. He is a figure known in the Abbey's folklore simply as a ghostly Benedictine monk, often seen in the cloisters. Modern paranormal lore, however, has given him a much more detailed story. These tales call him Brother Benedictus or Father Benedict, and claim he was a monk in the 16th century, possibly murdered by robbers trying to steal treasures from the Pyx chamber. He manifests as a completely solid figure. He is often described as being around 6 feet tall, with a pale, gaunt face, dressed in the traditional cowled habit of a Benedictine monk. The legends say he appears most frequently in the late afternoon, just as the Abbey is closing and the last of the day's visitors are being ushered out. And this is where the encounters become deeply unsettling. According to the stories, the monk appears so solid that people have no idea they're interacting with a ghost. They think he's a member of the Abbey's staff. He is said to be polite, civil, and incredibly helpful. One of the best-known tales, now a fixture of the Abbey's ghost lore, supposedly took place in 1932. 2 American tourists, having lost track of time, found themselves accidentally locked inside the cavernous building as dusk fell. Panic began to set in. Just then, a kindly monk appeared. He spoke to them calmly, assured them he could help, and guided them through the corridors to a side door, letting them out into the London evening. It was only after they left, relieved, that they realised the monk who had helped them fit the description of a ghost said to haunt the grounds. This is the classic encounter. He engages people in conversation, offers directions, and leads them through the cloisters, only for the encounter to end in a moment of pure, reality-shattering horror. Witnesses report that after a conversation, he will simply turn and walk directly through a solid stone wall or dissipate into the very structure of the abbey. One moment, you're speaking with a friendly flesh and blood man. The next, you are left staring at cold, unyielding stone, forced to confront the fact that you were just being guided by a spirit who may have been dead for nearly 500 years. The folklore suggests that the trauma of his death was so sudden that he has forgotten he is no longer alive. He continues his duties, night after night, a helpful guide whose very presence is a quiet, terrifying omen. He is the welcoming face of the Abbey's darkness, the first soul you meet on the path to understanding the Midnight Specter. But his gentle guidance leads us deeper into the Abbey's history, and toward a spirit born not of peace, but of violent revolutionary justice. If the ghostly monk represents the sacred murdered innocence of the Abbey, our second spirit represents its political turmoil and its capacity for brutal retribution. This is the ghost of John Bradshaw, the man who killed a king. In the mid-17th century, England was torn apart by civil war. King Charles I was captured, and in 1649 he was put on trial for treason against his own people, an unprecedented event in European history. The man chosen to preside over this revolutionary court, as Lord President of the High Court of Justice, was a formidable lawyer named John Bradshaw. It was him that guided the trial. And it was his voice that ultimately declared the king a tyrant, traitor, murderer, and public enemy, and under his authority that the king was sentenced to death and subsequently beheaded on a cold January morning. John Bradshaw became a powerful figure in Oliver Cromwell's New Republic. He was granted the deanery of Westminster as his residence and, according to Abbey law, used a small private room high up in the Triforium, that isolated gallery overlooking the tombs of the very monarchs his judgment had helped to overthrow. He died of natural causes on October 31st, 1659, and was given a lavish funeral and burial within the hallowed grounds of Henry VII's Lady Chapel in Westminster Abbey. But his rest would be brutally short. Just a year later, the monarchy was restored and King Charles II was on the throne, and he wanted revenge. On December 4th, 1660, the House of Commons voted that the bodies of the key regicides, Oliver Cromwell, Henry Ireton and John Bradshaw, were to be dug up from their honourable graves in the Abbey. In a gruesome act of posthumous punishment, their corpses were dragged on sledges to the gallows at Tyburn. On January 30th, 1661, the 12th anniversary of the king's execution, the decomposing bodies were hanged in public. Afterward, they were cut down, their heads were severed and displayed on spikes above Westminster Hall as a grotesque warning, and their headless bodies were thrown into an unmarked pit beneath the gallows. It is this horrific desecration, this eternal damnation for the crime of killing a king, that is said to have bound John Bradshaw's spirit to the Abbey. His ghost is not a helpful guide, it is a tormented soul, forever trapped in a loop of guilt and consequence. Legend states that his apparition is most often seen in the Triforium, the very place he is said to have worked, restlessly pacing back and forth. But he is said to become particularly active on one night of the year, January 30th, the anniversary of the execution he ordered. On this night, witnesses have claimed to see the figure of a man in a scarlet robe, resembling Judge Bradshaw, walking the high gallery, doomed to forever contemplate the monumental decision he made. Unlike the solid, interactive spirit of the monk, Bradshaw's ghost is a figure of pure anguish. He doesn't speak, he doesn't guide. He just paces, an ethereal prisoner in the scene of his former power. His eternal punishment is to look down from his perch at the grave of the king he condemned, trapped between the heavens he cannot reach and the consecrated ground that rejected his body. He is the second soul of the Midnight Specter, a manifestation of the Abbey's violent, unforgiving history, a reminder that some sins are so great, not even death can provide an escape. But there's one more soul, one born from a far more modern, yet equally profound, tragedy. Our final spectre is not from the age of monks or kings. He comes from the mud and trenches of the Great War, a conflict that scarred the soul of the 20th century. He is tied to the most sacred and emotionally charged grave in the entire abbey, the tomb of the unknown warrior. The idea was conceived in 1916 by an army chaplain named Reverend David Railton. While serving on the Western Front, he saw a simple, makeshift grave marked only by a rough wooden cross with the pencil-written words, "An unknown British soldier." The image stuck with him. After the war, he proposed that a single unidentified body should be brought back to England and buried with full state honours to represent the hundreds of thousands of soldiers who had died and would never be identified. The idea resonated powerfully with a nation grieving an unimaginable loss. In November 1920, the plan was put into motion with solemn secrecy. 4 unidentified bodies were exhumed from the major battlefields of the Western Front. They were brought to a makeshift chapel in France. There, Brigadier General Louis Wyatt, without knowing which battlefield any of the bodies had come from, selected one. The chosen soldier was placed in a coffin made from an oak tree from Hampton Court Palace and transported back to London. On November the 11th, 1920, Armistice Day, the unknown warrior was laid to rest at the west end of the abbey's nave, in soil brought from the fields of France, under a slab of black Belgian marble. In that first week alone, an estimated 1 million people came to pay their respects. And it's from this atmosphere of silence that the third ghost appears. The story goes that the apparition of a soldier only manifests when the abbey is completely empty and silent, after the last visitor has departed and the noise of the city has faded away. When the great church is at its most still, a figure is said to slowly materialize beside the tomb. He appears as a World War I infantryman, standing silently with his head bowed, as if in prayer or standing guard over his fallen brother. He remains for a few moments in this solemn vigil, a silent sentinel in the dead of night, before slowly fading back into the nothingness from which he came. Who is he? No one knows. He is as anonymous in death as the man he watches over. Is he the spirit of the unknown warrior himself, briefly returning to his own grave? Or is he the ghost of another lost soldier, drawn to the only place on earth that honors his sacrifice? The law offers no answers. He doesn't interact. He doesn't threaten. His presence is one of deep, unending sorrow and duty. He is the ghost of a man who died in a foreign field, one of the many multitudes mentioned in the tomb's inscription. He is the quietest of the Abbey specters, yet perhaps the most heartbreaking. He is the silent, watchful soul of the Midnight Specter, representing a grief so profound it transcends time. This is where we move from established folklore into a theory, a way to connect the dots of these ghostly legends. Imagine the Abbey after dark. The last verger has locked the gates. The immense silence descends. This is the moment the legends say the ghosts appear. But what if the silence doesn't just allow them to appear? What if it awakens something else? The Midnight Specter is not one entity but a process. It is the Abbey's supernatural mechanism, a 3-act play of spiritual process. First, the lure of the monk. Second, the judgment of the judge. Third, the silent acceptance of the soldier. Each ghost is a different tool used by the Abbey to process and absorb the living who linger too long, transforming them from intruders into permanent residents. The horror is not that you'll be attacked by a ghost, but that you will become one. You'll be guided by a spectre who has forgotten he's dead, judged by a spirit tormented by his past, and finally, stand an eternal, silent watch with a soldier, becoming another secret kept by the stones of Westminster Abbey. The legends of Westminster Abbey are a tapestry of history, folklore, and genuinely unsettling experiences. We've explored 3 of its most prominent ghosts, but countless other stories are embedded in its walls. So, what do you make of the Midnight Specter? Is it a composite entity, the Abbey's own supernatural process, or are they simply 3 separate, tormented souls trapped in one of the world's most historic buildings? I'm always fascinated by different theories and local ghost stories, so I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for listening. Good night.